Hi, everyone, and thanks for watching us on NextGenInfra.io. Today, I'm joined by Doug Merritt, the CEO of Aviatrix, a company that's redefining secure cloud networking for the enterprise. Doug is well known for his transformative leadership at Splunk, and now at Aviatrix, he's spearheading a shift from cloud networking to a security-first architecture that spans multiple clouds. We'll be discussing his vision for the super cloud and the rising imperative of embedded zero trust and how enterprises can better prepare their infrastructure for the AI era. So, with that, Doug, thanks for joining us, and let's dive in.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me on, Jim.
Yeah, so tell us about this new product introduction that you guys have, the Cloud Native Security Fabric. What is it, and how is it different from what we've seen before?
Yes, it is. I guess, officially launched this Cloud Native Security Fabric late last week, but we've been working on it for actually many years at Aviatrix. And our perspective and view, having served hundreds of customers that have critical workloads in the cloud from a multi-cloud networking perspective, we've always wrapped security around network security around our networking constructs. Is that the shift to cloud has blown up a whole series of long held assumptions that everybody knows. It's the hard part is not saying the words. It's really for humans at the other end digesting the true first principle implications of these words. And I'll go through those shifts quickly, but the net is the critical workloads that almost every organization globally has put in the cloud are at risk. There's a very large attack surface for adversaries to find and then leverage effectively, which is part of why I think we're seeing so many breaches on such a rapid occurrence right now. That Aviatrix is deeply focused on helping to educate the market around so that organizations can close that large attack surface, and it's extending zero trust from the two areas that people I think commonly know and have been focused on, which is zero trust identity. Make sure it's Jim. You understand who Jim is. He could be in a coffee shop. He's no longer on a VPN. And zero trust endpoint. Very successful companies out there have been evangelizing those two aspects, and those are both still critical. We're advocating for zero trust cloud workloads, which is ensuring that the communication between workloads from an app to a database, from a database to a MCP server, an agentic framework, or an LLM, that those are observed and secure, that they have a zero trust posture.
Yeah. So why is that problem, so hard to solve? And what does your research tell you about, what companies want in terms of solving that problem?
So the three changes that I alluded to at the very beginning that people digest, I think, help bring the problem home is one, the internet is now the enterprise network. And most cybersecurity, most companies that grew up 90s and beyond were dedicated to protecting the data centers from the internet. Now the internet is the enterprise network. If you think about it, so many of the critical services that organizations rely on from the cloud, an S3 bucket, a Snowflake database, a call to OpenAI, all those are over the internet. So the internet is now the network, and the internet was not built to be a highly secure and trusted network. The second is that the perimeter has atomized. The core, the hand in glove approach of protect the data center from the internet was you harden the perimeter and the castle and moat orientation that we all grew up with. And you had 4, 5, 10, 12 perimeters you had to worry about, a handful of data centers. Now, every workload that is in the cloud, every VPC, every VNet, every VCN, every Kubernetes cluster, every API endpoint is its own perimeter. So you've moved from 10 perimeters to hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, depending on the organization. And then the third is that these workloads that were once stateful, so you could have things like a static IP address to a workload, are now ephemeral. So when you combine those three, that is what creates the massive attack surface for adversaries to go after. And we can go through how that works, but
Yeah.
our our solution, our architecture grew up in that world and natively enforces or provides a whole different frame of reference that enables this zero trust cloud workload architecture that we're talking about.
Yeah, so it is really the multi-cloud issue, right? That the workloads are everywhere and all the enterprises are now reliant on so many of the different clouds.
So multi-cloud makes it even worse. But
Yeah.
the average customer that is just in AWS or just in Azure probably has all these characteristics, has 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 perimeters within that cloud. Many of those perimeters, many of those workloads are internet accessible, either directly or one hop away. And many of those workloads are ephemeral. And so that whether it's one cloud or multiple clouds, that threat is similar. When you go to multiple clouds, it gets worse because the constructs, the definitions of how workloads and networking works within every cloud are pretty different from each other. So it makes the operationalization of
Yeah.
a set of security policies or consistent enforcement around those policies much more difficult than in one cloud. But the problem actually exists whether you're in one cloud or whether you're in multiple clouds.
Okay. So could you explain a little bit how does the CNSF then go about solving this? Are you embedded in all the multiple clouds? What's the operating principle that makes this work?
Yes, the core of a cloud native security fabric is that one, it's built the way the clouds operate, which is the cloud native aspect, which is for any vendor is a lot of work to make sure, given how different the clouds are, as we just talked about, that the fabric, the security fabric that sits within the clouds, that is deeply incorporated into the operating capability of each one of those clouds. So we have a solution that deploys inside on behalf of our customers that deploys inside Azure, AWS, OCI, GCP, Alibaba. It extends to the edge. So when you're connecting from a Equinix or Megaport or some type of POP from, because many people have got traditional data centers also, it extends all the way to the edge and out to the data center that critical workloads are often still residing in as well. So it's a pervasive deployment, which is why we call it a fabric. It's flexible. It's pervasive inside of a cloud, but it's also pervasive across different clouds, so that you get a single consistent set of visibility, set of policies, enforcement capability, and remediation capability.
Okay. And the zero trust, what makes it zero trust then? Is it's common across all of them?
Right now, from that old castle and moat orientation, and again, it's just so hard to really dive deep on first principles and change perspective. The what common defense in depth practices is you did try to have a series of difficult areas for an attacker to get through. But in general, what people call east-west or lateral movement within a data center was trusted because you did such a good job of defending the perimeter. The amount of inspection and control necessary as an application talked to a database or a middleware layer talk to an application or database, that didn't have to have a zero trust orientation, that was a more trusted set of communications. With the three principles we talked about, the internet is the network, perimeter has been atomized, and many workloads are ephemeral, where the appropriate way to have a true zero trust framework that complements identity and endpoint is to take that same zero trust approach for workloads. So if you think about any of us going to a site, making a request and getting a response back, once that set of packets gets inside the cloud, it tends to ping between many workloads and often goes outside of the domain or control of the entity that's trying to give us a return result set through an API call or through a call to a SaaS app. And that zero trust orientation is ensure that every workload communication is a zero trust framework. It
I see.
validates Is that workload safe? Is it who that workload is represented to be? Is it appropriate for this communication to happen at this point in time between these two workloads to complement that same zero trust orientation you have on identity, access, and endpoint?
I see. I see. So Doug, where does this go next? Especially, in terms of AI, enterprises, of course, are running their own AIs in multiple versions, and I'm sure that brings complications. But thinking from your, first principles explanation, how do you build it for that AI era to make sure that they're not going to exceed the AIs are not going to exceed the boundaries that you've set?
Yeah, there are a couple dimensions around AI that are important to us. One is we are, like everybody else, incorporating Gen AI and agentic AI into our solutions. How do we make the cloud native security fabric more autonomous, more intelligent, more capable? So that is a very important thread that our CPO, CTO, and engineering teams are focused on. But the rise of AI, both Gen AI and agentic AI, is also a huge propellant for a cloud native security fabric. As people deploy Gen and agentic AI, what happens? You want to radically increase the number of workloads that go into the cloud or into multiple clouds for organizations with things like Gen AI. And then as you invoke agentic AI, you radically increase the number of identities or players that are happening, that are partaking, that are creating packets and workloads within those clouds. And agentic AI has this awesome dimension of seeking to fulfill its goal. So the already ephemeral nature that exists with many of these workloads, a Kubernetes cluster does not have a set of static IP addresses, for example, that it is attached to, becomes even more of a challenge for organizations. As data pathways and access pathways are instantaneously formed to fulfill the charter that an agent might have, and then torn back down again. So the rise of agentic and Gen AI within organizations, I think, is actually the bell,
Yeah.
the call to say, oh my
Uh-huh.
gosh, you haven't taken a zero trust cloud workload orientation before, man, you better do it now. And then the third aspect is now how are adversaries using Gen AI and agentic AI, and
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
mission we're all
I
worried about.
I think we're all feeling that, how the rules of the game are changing and so quickly. Doug, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it. We'll keep watching to see what happens next.
Awesome, Jim. Thank you.